Our club has always been a forum for public figures, thought leaders, and decision makers to share their ideas. Here, we offer access to dynamic political, business, and public personalities.
We are dedicated to encouraging debate on the issues that matter to this city, this province, and this country.
The Canadian Club is one of the most important podiums anywhere in the world that a Canadian can speak to, tell Canadians what it is that they think, develop those thoughts. And so I want to thank you for that very, very much.
Please join me in thanking our esteemed panelists today.
Through our programs and events, including our youth and young leaders programs, our diversity partnerships, our joint events, and our media and social media opportunities, we offer you access to dynamic political, social, and business figures from abroad and right here at home.
The platform from which the eloquence of Canada has flowed all of that time, whether it be business, education, politics, sports, arts, and culture. If someone wants to say something to Canadians about this country and about the future of this country, this is the venue you choose.
Good afternoon, Canadian Club members and guests. I really hope that you've enjoyed your lunch, and obviously you're still taking a full advantage of reconnecting with old friends, making some new ones, and just generally being together. So I'm so delighted to see that. My name is Joseph Lowe, and I'm the current president of Canadian Club Toronto. I'm so delighted to be your host today. And while it's truly special to be gathering in person like this once again, I'm also very grateful to all of you who are joining us here online. Thanks to the AV services of Van Valkenburg Communications and livemeeting.ca, we are able to amplify our podium directly to you as well. We are deeply appreciative of the generous sponsorship offered by Borden Ladner Gervais and Bruce Power, whose representatives are part of our head table today. So thank you, Christine and Clint, for making this event possible. Today, it is apropos that Ehren Cory and Lisa Raitt will, among other topics, be chatting about the role of infrastructure in achieving our climate goals at the first ever Net Zero Canadian Club Toronto event. Last week, we announced our partnership with Canada's Forest Trust, a leading ESG firm planting smart forests to take action on climate change, utilizing the power of nature. I'm proud to share that this partnership will help us reduce our carbon footprint of our entire season of Canadian Club Toronto events. Like all Canadian Club events, we are also interactive today. So if you have a question for our guests, you're going to find in the ballroom now Q&A cards kind of on your tables. Fill them out, and we'll collect them and get them up to the stage. And if you're joining us online, you can hit the Submit a Question button on the right-hand side of your screen, and we'll be sure to get your questions that way as well. And now to our speaker. I first met him when we were classmates at Western University. I won't say how many years ago. I do, however, remember Ehren Cory as an exceptional student, a great athlete, and even at that time, a budding leader. Today, his myriad skills serve him well in his role as president and CEO of the Canada Infrastructure Bank. So whether it's light rail transit or teams, building really is in Ehren's DNA. Previously, he was the president and CEO of Infrastructure Ontario, the provincial crown agency responsible for financing, building, and enhancing the value of this province's infrastructure and real estate assets. Before that, he was a partner at McKinsey & Company, serving a broad array of clients in its capital projects practice. Today, Ehren leads the implementation of the $10 billion growth plan at Canada Infrastructure Bank, accelerating Canadian infrastructure investment in its priority sectors. Joining him in conversation today is the Honourable Lisa Raitt. For the past 2.5 years, she has served as Vice Chair of Global Investment Banking, CIBC Capital Markets. An established private and public sector leader, her current focus is on the senior client coverage and business development in the energy, infrastructure, and industrial sectors. Ehren will be joined in conversation by Lisa, after which they will both be joined by a very special guest, a very special secret guest, who I am also very curious to hear from. Ehren and Lisa, it's my distinct pleasure to turn the Canadian Club podium over to the two of you.
All righty.
Hello.
Got a lot of questions, Ehren.
I'm ready.
Great. And welcome, and thank you, everybody, those who are tuning in and those who came out today to hear from Ehren and the great things going on in the Canada Infrastructure Bank. So let's start right there. We're coming out of the pandemic, I think, eventually. It feels like it. Where are you now in terms of the Canada Infrastructure Bank? Give us a little bit of an update on what's been going on, and take the opportunity to let people in the room know what's happening currently with you guys.
Sure. Thanks, Lisa. And thanks, as you say, it's so nice to be back in a room with people and with people online. I think that's our new world, isn't it? Yeah, I'm so proud of the progress we've made over the last few years at the CIB, and a big thanks to those in our team who are here today and who are watching, because I think we've been able to build something in a relatively short order that, as Canadians, we should be really excited about. In some ways, I really think that when I think of the CIB, we're like the technology hype curve. That's what they use in the technology world a lot of time when they talk about the growth of a new product. There's the initial peak of inflated expectations that this thing's going to be everything to everyone, and then I love this, there's the trough of disillusionment. That's where people, this technology doesn't work, it doesn't do what I thought it would, and then there's the slope of enlightenment, which I think is just a fantastic term.
I think you're describing people's marriages.
Maybe that too. The trough of disillusionment. My wife is here today, and I would not agree with that.
No, I didn't mean you.
Other people's marriages.
Yeah. So the slope of enlightenment.
The slope of enlightenment, that's where people figure out, how does the product actually work? How can we apply this thing? And then there's eventually the world of maturity and success. And we're really, I think, on the slope of enlightenment. We're in a place now where we've managed to work with project proponents in the public and the private sector for the last few years and figure out what are the things that are getting in the way of infrastructure projects in our country from getting built, and how can, through our risk-taking and patient capital, how can the CIB help ignite projects that are stuck? And the truth is, we're just a tool in the toolkit. But the challenge we face collectively as Canadians is we have incredible infrastructure needs. We're a vast country. We're a country that's a trading nation. We require real infrastructure to move people and goods and to be connected in this country and to meet our net zero goals. So if you think of how a country like us, what we need, our infrastructure requirements are really vast. And the reality is we can't afford to get that done in one way. And we certainly can't afford to do it all through, I'll say, traditional means, which are fundamentally government providing grants and building public infrastructure on the one hand, and then private sector companies kind of cherry picking, let's say, and doing stuff that's really profitable. I have broadband at my home, that's infrastructure in Toronto, and didn't require any government support. But there's a big chunk in the middle of viable, really important infrastructure, but that's fundamentally not quite economic for the private sector to do, and the public sector can't afford to do it alone. And it's there that the CIB can make a real difference. So I think we found our footing. We're much clearer now on that gap, and we're clearer in the sectors that we're playing in and in how we can work with partners. And as a result, if you look at where we are, to catch people up on the story of the CIB, we've, as of last quarter, if I go back to the end of Q1 for us, which was June, we had made 34 investments or investment commitments, either credit agreements signed and funds flowing, or at least a definitive term sheet negotiated and kind of in the closing process on 34 projects. That's about $7.5 billion from us. They represent projects over $22 billion. So if you think about what that is, that's $22 billion, 35 infrastructure projects that were not getting built in this country that now are. And so when I talk about being on the slope of enlightenment, I can now, and some of the partners of those projects are in this room. I see someone from U of T over there who we've done an energy retrofit project with a few months ago. And I see is he a special guest? I see John in front of us in the building we're in today, talking about getting our buildings to net zero. So we've got proof points and examples now across all of our sectors that start to show how the CIB can accelerate the infrastructure build in our country and fill that gap.
Okay, so federal parties have been promising, and provincial parties too, have been promising infrastructure plans for as long as I've been running in politics.
I knew this wasn't going to stay friendly for very long.
No, it's going to be good. I'm actually going to give you support here. So for 25 years, they've been promising infrastructure projects, right? It's always a part of somebody's platform. And in fact, we ended up with Infrastructure Canada. It was part of Transport Canada. When I was the minister, I had pieces of infrastructure. It was all over the place. So having it in one place makes a lot of sense to me. So tell me why CIB is such an integral part to actually going from promising infrastructure to getting infrastructure done. What are you doing differently than what they did in Ottawa in those buildings, other than fight all over the projects all the time?
Well, thank you. I think it does come back to understanding why good projects don't happen. And I'm talking about partners in the room, and I'm going to use a specific example of a project that I love and a person I love, Annette Verschuren. So Annette has a project along with First Nation partners and other private investors. It's a battery storage project.
We're aware of that at CIBC.
Yes, you are aware of that project as well.
We're happy with this project, yes.
It's a classic because it's a project that in the fullness of time is commercial. And eventually we're going to see across not just Canada but around the world battery storage as part of our electricity solution. It's the only thing, if we want renewable grids, we need a way to store the power so that when it's not windy, we've got power. There is a viable commercial idea there. There's also a lot of risk and uncertainty. There's risk and uncertainty right now in the development and construction phase of those first few projects. There's risk and uncertainty in exactly what the economics are going to be, how we're going to be able to store and sell back to the grid. The technology is still emerging in some ways in terms of the life and the reliability of the batteries. So all of those things make them, for a purely commercial venture, really risky. Yeah. And what Annette doesn't need is a grant from government to make that happen. What she needs is a partner like us. I hope, Annette, you agree with me, a partner who can invest alongside her by either providing a loan or some form of equity investment, and we do both, where we can share in some of that risk, the ramp-up risk, the early year adoption risk, and eventually they will not need us. And that's our goal. But in the interim, if we want that project to happen now and not 5 years from now, that's what the CIB can do. And it's different than getting a government grant, and it's different than lots of great projects out there that don't need us at all. But there is a way that we can short-circuit or accelerate the development cycle.
Okay, so you mentioned some emerging areas, very curious. There's a lot of, look, the Inflation Reduction Act in the United States has certainly made an impact in terms of people looking to put capital into projects and the incentives that go with it. Tell me a little bit about how CIB here in Canada is helping other emerging sectors.
When the CIB was created, I think one of the other things that's allowed our momentum to really take off is that we've really ironed out and figured out our governance relationship with the government of Canada.
Okay.
And people often ask, how you're a Crown corporation, how political or not are things? So I think it's important to start my answer to your question this way. We are a Crown corporation. We're investing your money. We're investing taxpayers' money to get infrastructure built. The way we do that is we calculate. So when Annette talks to me about the project I just described, the way we look at that project, first and foremost, is what are the GHG benefits? How does this help accelerate our transition to net zero?
Yeah.
Secondly, what is the economic return to us? Will we get paid back, and with what interest? But we're not fundamentally a financial investor. We're an impact investor. As Joe said in his intro, we're looking at those returns. The government of Canada defines for us those outcomes. So for us, GHG emission reduction, better connectivity of Canadians through both transit and broadband, access to infrastructure to our Indigenous communities. Those are set for us by the government. And from there, it's our job to go out and find good projects and make good investments. And we have a board of directors, and we act very commercially, if you will, from a set of public policy goals that are not ours, that government gives us. Last spring, government gave us some new direction or new areas to focus. Those were in electric vehicle charging. How do we accelerate the rollout of chargers that we're starting to see pop up? I don't know about any of you, but you drive the 400 highways, or they're coming, but it's slow. So how do we do more of that? How do we do things like build a hydrogen economy and perhaps position Canada to be a leader in that emerging space? How do we make carbon capture and storage actually happen in the West, which is fundamental to producing energy we need, but in cleaner ways? And so those have been real focus areas of ours the last 6 months. Some people will have seen today we've actually launched our investment program for EV charging, which we're really excited about. We're going to partner with private sector charging operators, again, to accelerate the rollout, get more chargers out there faster. Because, of course, there's the classic virtuous circle where I'm hesitant to buy an electric vehicle until I see enough charging options for me, especially on longer journeys. Folks installing chargers are saying, I can cherry pick and do the places that I think will make money, but the places that right now are unprofitable but might be 5 to 10 years from now, I'm going to wait because I'm a smart investor and that's what I do. And we're trying to help them improve the economics, and share the risk so they can get more chargers out there faster.
Yeah.
So that we've launched today. We're excited about that, and we're really excited about upcoming investments, I think later this fall, in some of those emerging areas that government has pointed us at, including hydrogen, including potentially other forms of renewable or non-emitting energy generation.
Okay, so awesome stuff. And in fairness, a lot of what you're talking about can sound a little bit like a government entity, like a government department. So tell me about the private sector capital portion of it.
Right.
The 4-to-1 leveraging, because that's the part that I know Transport Canada can't do or Infrastructure Canada could not do.
Right.
So tell us why you guys can do it at CIB. Is it fair to be measured that way?
Yeah, I think the idea of how do we get that hybrid and the bridge between public and private is really important. That's why you're absolutely right. That's the purpose of the CIB. We think about it in two ways. The first is how much, from a financing perspective, what's the balance between public and private capital? You and I have a project we're working on this fall. That's a great one where CIBC, and all of us sometimes say the wrong thing, like it's just one extra C, but we're two different institutions. But we're working together.
I guarantee the Liberals would not have me at CIB.
That's
but
right. We're working on a project where CIBC is providing senior debt, and we're providing an instrument as well. And then there's private capital.
Okay.
That upfront financing answers the question, how does government not finance all of these things? But remember, our investment in that project is a loan. Others are equity investments. We are getting paid back. So I think that people should, sometimes people do really quickly blend us with granting mechanisms. We get paid back. But the real question is, think about the long-term multiplier that comes with that. So in our upfront project together, I think you guys are lending, let's just make an example, you're lending half the total capital cost, we're providing some, and then there's equity, the remainder.
Right.
Over time, as we get paid back, eventually the cost of that loan to Canada is really measured by what interest rate we charged and what discount or premium that was done at, and what risk we took. But at the end of the day, the cost to Canadians, if you think about it, is only the potential for credit loss or that sort of thing, relative to getting our project built. So in our project, that's $150 million, and we might be loaning them, I don't know, $50 million of the dollars up front. There's an upfront private capital financing ratio. And then there's a long-term cost to Canadians ratio. And if you look at that, we are actually tracking in the 4 to 5 to 1 range in terms of what that infrastructure is costing Canadians. You are absolutely right. That is very different than other government tools in the government toolkit. And as I said, we're just a tool in the toolkit. There are some projects that isn't enough for, right? Us providing that patient long-term capital might not be enough for, and those projects are better served through other channels, through the traditional grant world and that sort of thing.
And on the flip side, you also do some advisory too.
Yeah, so we've been working, we're not a consulting firm or something. When we do advisory work, it's really in the interest of trying to help a partner scope out a project and make it investable for both the market and for us. We do that with public sector entities, so like we've worked with the province of Alberta. They received a private proponent who wants to build a railroad from the airport to Banff. Super cool, really interesting that a private company came forward this. We've been working in an advisory capacity with Alberta and the private bidder to try and structure how could that work. We're doing the same thing in Atlantic Canada around transmission assets, where we're thinking about what's the regional solution to getting to fully clean power in the Atlantic provinces, which I know you know very well. So in those areas, what we're trying to do is help bridge between the public entity and the private capital that might come into the deal and figure out how to create something that can work for all.
So tell us a little bit more about your EV charging, because I think there's a lot of folks in the room who have taken advantages of the rebates, and people are getting more excited when they're thinking about trading in their old car. They want to think about whether or not they're going to go full EV, and you think about, where am I going to charge this thing on the way into downtown Toronto? So tell us a little bit about your announcement today.
Absolutely. So it is a really, again, a good encapsulation of sort of what we are uniquely positioned to do. So the way we think about our role in EV charging is, as I said, to help accelerate the rollout. For level 3 fast chargers, they are businesses. They charge a cost per minute of charging, and there's a certain utilization, of minutes of the day of charging, at which they break even and then start to make money. So the way we've structured our investment, we'll partner with anyone. By the way, anyone who's thinking about the charging business, please talk to us. We will make an investment, and our repayment is tied directly to charger utilization. So there will be a period of forgiveness early on where you don't need to repay, we'll defer payments, and if, because of things that are outside of everyone's control, supply chain bottlenecks, not as many EVs are getting on the road as we all thought, if that defers our payment a little longer, that's great. The chargers are out there and they're operating. As the utilization ramps up, eventually they reach a point where the businesses break even, our interest rate will step up. And where they get even more productive, the chargers, and we think that the private sector partner is making money, our interest rate will step up again. And eventually they'll want to take us out because we'll be more expensive than other choices, other sources of financing, you and others. So we're really filling that gap. And again, I think that's how you can say we're driving private capital into the market, because actually it's not in anyone's interest. If there's a private sector player here who has a business plan to put chargers, I don't know, on the 401 somewhere, and they think they're going to make money, it's actually detrimental to borrow from us because we'll be expensive.
Right.
Because our financing cost is linked to the utilization. So we're really trying to create a world where the incentives are aligned, where private sector companies are borrowing from us to help them get through that uncertainty hurdle, and then we'll be gone.
Okay.
And we're excited about it. And as I say, there are also, this is in parallel, we're working really closely with a government department, NRCan in this case, who also have significant grant dollars available. And they're going to be the right people to get chargers to more remote communities where, honestly, a positive economic payback is 10 to 15 years, is longer than the life of the chargers. And so that's a different stream, and honestly, that's not really one we would be best suited to fill. But there is a middle lane that we can, and we're excited to.
No pun intended, middle lane.
That's
well done. But so to your point on just following up on that one, so CIB is stackable with other government programming and other government incentives?
Well, often yes, because in many cases, I'll give you a different example. There's a really cool hydro project in northern BC. It supplies power. It's called Atlan. It actually supplies power to the Yukon grid.
Okay.
And it's a critical, for the territory of the Yukon, critical part of them getting to net zero and getting Indigenous and non-Indigenous communities off of much more carbon-intensive forms of electricity. It's a great project. It has customers in the Yukon. In no scenario does it even with a future carbon price and you layer on all of them, it does not fully pay for itself.
Right.
It requires a tranche of grant money actually to get to a place where then it's investable for both private partners, Indigenous partners, and the CIB. So yes, in that case, the grant gets it up to a place where we can then treat it as a commercial venture. And in a number of ways, in the transit sector, in the electricity sector, that hybrid kind of model makes sense. We always have to be thinking about not over-investing government money into a project, so we work really closely with our partners at Transport or NRCan or Infrastructure Canada to make sure we're not overstacking. It's a very Ottawa term, but we are absolutely able to do it, and in many cases, it's the right way to get a project done, that blended approach.
Yeah, and overdoing it with government money is a very novel approach, too.
Yes.
So that's a nice way of looking at it. If anybody has any questions from the floor, we can certainly pick up the questions and ask Ehren. Otherwise, I'll just plow on. Let's talk about project implementation. So inflation has gone up significantly. Cost of everything has gone up significantly. Supply chain issues you already talked about. You have a finite amount of money from the government, right? You're kind of capped. Other governments
For now.
in the UK. Well, you know what? I admire your enthusiasm. That's good. But the reality is that there is a finite amount of money, and you have projects. How do you cope with the change in price?
Well, you're absolutely right. And what we are seeing and hearing from our project partners is the challenges of supply chain and are really significant. Anyone who has a construction project quote that's more than 6 months old is redoing it rapidly.
Yeah.
In many ways, that says that the need for the CIB is greater than ever. Because again, the gap we're filling in the projects is getting more acute. And if there's a time value to the infrastructure, a GHG saving now is more important than 1-3 years from now. A transit rider who's able to access transit when they're currently stuck in their cars and stuck in a parking lot is important. So in many ways, our financing is more crucial now to help projects bridge that gap. And we're seeing that. And so that's putting real demands on us. I think it's requiring us to think creatively about how do we help our partners through that interim period. At the same time, you're absolutely right. We borrow our money from Canada. We have a cost of funds too, just like the rest of the world. And that's going up as rates have gone up. And so we've got to be really disciplined about that. we start every conversation at the CIB from two questions. One, what is the outcome we're getting? How many tons of GHG, or how many new transit riders, or how many new homes connected to broadband? And two, what is the cost to Canada of this loan in the interest rate we would be able to charge? And we're really trying to solve for what do the project on that second question, what do the project economics need? Right? So it's not what can we make, it's what does the project need from us to happen? And you're right, as that gap gets bigger, the need for us gets bigger.
What's the pipeline like?
Well, so we've, as I said, we were at, I think, 34 projects we invested in at the end of June. I believe that's at 39 or 40. This week, we've done a district energy project in Richmond, which we're really excited about. It's rapidly building out the city of Richmond's district energy network with a partnership with a private sector, Corix, which is in turn owned by BCI. So an institutional investor and a private company partnered with the city of Richmond and their utility and us. Just really great example. We have our project here in the Royal York, working on getting a building like this to net zero, which we're really excited about. Getting our building sector across our entire country to net zero in the institutional space, whether it's with a hospital or a university. The building space where we've partnered with building owners like Dream or with Kingset today, getting those projects going. So we're having a lot of those. That's just this week, and today's Wednesday. There's still a few days left. Our pipeline looking forward, we have over 50 projects that are active in negotiation, in discussion and in negotiation. And we manage a funnel of those that is constantly alive, and we feel really excited about. And we see a lot of demand. As I said, we're now at somewhere close to $8 billion of our initial 35 invested. That's great, and we have lots more to go. So we're trying to pick up that pace even more.
Okay, cool. One of the phenomenon's not the correct word, but one of the things that have been noted in the last couple of years is the power of Indigenous investment. Tell me a little bit about the projects. I know you mentioned the one with the net already, but tell me a little bit more about projects that you're in that space in.
For sure, and Atlan, which I was talking about earlier, the partner there is also a development corporation and an electricity business owned by a First Nation and also with incredible leadership, so another great partner. As I mentioned earlier, we have a set of outcomes that we track to, and the last, and I say last, it's the most important, and it cuts across all the others, is building infrastructure in partnership with and to the benefit of Indigenous communities. And something we've had to learn as the CIB, I think, over the last few years is how to make ourselves relevant and useful to Indigenous communities. The truth is, like we started with an investment threshold. We want to invest our ticket size $100 million. That's not the infrastructure need in getting an Indigenous community off diesel onto clean power. That's not the need to get northern remote communities in northern Alberta broadband access that they don't currently have. We made an investment with a technology company, Indigenous owned, in northern Alberta. It's $10 million. So we've had to rethink some of it. We've hired a dedicated team of folks, many of them with Indigenous backgrounds, which we're really proud of, who are working closely with partners. We've made investments in an Indigenous-owned railroad, the broadband project I mentioned, Atlan, so in some Indigenous-owned companies, and then a number of others, like Annette's example, where she's got a 50-50 partnership between herself and Six Nations of the Grand River Development Corporation, and they're again, progressive, amazing leadership there who we're excited to partner with. We've invested now, in our objectives, you'd see this on our website, we have a goal of a minimum of $1 billion of our money going into projects in partnership with Indigenous partners, and we're, if I remember my numbers, somewhere over $200 million now, and lots of room to go.
Amazing. So, question from the audience, which is a really good question, I think. How do you go faster? How do you build infrastructure faster?
Yeah, it's not. That's the question we're asking ourselves every day. I think there's, and we're only, a small part. That's a big question. I think all of us in this country who are focused on building the kind of country and society we want, because that's what infrastructure ends up being, are look at that whole problem and then try and figure out what piece of it we own. But for sure, getting better at getting projects from concept to shovels in the ground, whether that's how do we make environmental processes work in ways that both engage communities and not just get real feedback and are meaningful, but also quick.
Yeah.
And how do we move urgency through that process? Something that I think all of us should be thinking about. How do we make sure we've got the people and the resources to build projects that we want to, and how do we create a pipeline? You asked about the pipeline of projects, but what's the pipeline of capacity to build those projects? Again, how do we build that is something we should all care about. Again, I'm not saying things about what the CIB ourselves, but as an industry and as a country, those are the sorts of things I think we need to be worrying about. In our case, what we're doing is we're trying to keep building our team. We've now have an office in Calgary and in Montreal, and of course our head office here. We're trying to engage with partners across the country to help identify projects that are shovel-worthy,
Right.
and figure out how we can help them short-circuit what can be that decade-long process sometimes of. And if you're a project developer, you're trying to move so many things in concert: a regulatory or an approval process, getting your money lined up, long lead supply items. It's a juggling act, and if we can help at least short-circuit a few of those balls in the air, I don't know, my analogy didn't work, but if we can help make that a little easier, that's how we can help accelerate projects.
Okay, so question from the audience, and it's high level, bit of a policy tilt to it, but bear with me on this one. So with all the new investments into EVs, does the CIB plan on working with transit agencies to create a new mode of transportation to service the first and the last mile of the trip, so that you're not jumping in your gas-fired car to go to pick up a transit, so it's one seamless kind of movement, making integrated EVs as part of the transit system?
Yeah, it's a really good question. One thing that we've done a lot of that I haven't talked about yet today, but we've made a significant investment in zero-emission fleets with municipalities, buses, and it's mostly been electric buses so far. And so the logic there is you can help transit systems get greener faster, and we're sharing, in that case, we're sharing with the municipalities in the risk of the performance of an electric bus. There's big savings that come with those, so that's the source of repayment is the revenue of those projects, actually the savings from getting off diesel, but the risk that comes with them is battery performance. So that's something we've done a bunch of with Brampton and Calgary and Edmonton and school bus operators across the country as well. To the question about especially first mile, last mile, look, at the end of the day, I'd say maybe. It's not something we're actively doing yet, but we would, again, the lens for us is what's the GHG emission reduction we could drive out of that? And we rank our investments in that way. We look at the outcome, and it's in an approved sector that we're in, transit and transportation, is a place that we're investing. Is that a way to put our money to work to get big bang for our buck? And I don't know the answer to that, but that's exactly how we would approach the question.
Are you focusing more on private-led infrastructure? You're allowed to do that now since Budget 2020.
It's a real mix, Lisa, and I think that's as it should be. There are some sectors of our infrastructure is a funny thing, right? And every country has this. We have stuff that's predominantly private sector based. Our broadband, most of it is owned by ISPs, and it's a private sector, but it's clearly a public good and a public asset.
Right.
And at the other end of the spectrum, our transit systems in Canada are all government owned. And I think we have to be able to play in both of those spaces. I think we were trying to get that balance right and support municipalities, provinces, territories, and Indigenous communities in their goals, but also helping private sector partners accelerate in delivering on public good from their perspective. So I think it's a real balance of both.
Okay, Canada Growth Fund was announced this year as well. How do you interact with that? Is it the same thing, or can you give us any insight as to what it is and when it's coming? And
well, I can't give you too much insight. That's not my department, if you will.
Right.
But what I can say is I think there's a real synergy or a natural logic you can follow from clean tech, in particular development, and how do we become leaders in specific areas of clean tech?
Yeah.
How do you help companies scale up and that sort of thing, which is not us.
No.
That's pre-us, and I think that's a tool like the Growth Fund could be really good for. And then the Infrastructure Bank, which is about taking those great clean technologies and deploying them at infrastructure scale.
Got it.
And we're the Canada Infrastructure Bank, and we get we've had great people come to us with great ideas that we would say are not yet ready for infrastructure scale deployment. They want to do a pilot or a test or get the technology ready. And I say to those, the answer isn't no from us. It's not yet, because that's not an infrastructure project yet. So in saying that, I can see a natural complementarity between something like the Growth Fund, but other than that, I don't have any comment about how that's developing or coming together. But I suspect it'll be another tool in the broad toolkit.
Right.
And it's rarely are we in a world where it's either or. I just think there's a great chance for us to work together.
You can see it hanging together. So just to follow, a question from the audience along that lines, which is, will CIB invest in the production of novel tech for energy storage projects?
Yes, if it's ready for deployment at infrastructure scale. Exactly.
Yeah.
It follows directly on my answer. And we're tracking and monitoring. And it's interesting. We have a lot of debate internally about what that means, what from a technology readiness perspective, sort of when is something ready. But our general view is when it's actually ready to be deployed at the scale of infrastructure, that's when it's ready for us.
Amazing. I have one last question. I'm going to read it verbatim because it'll probably be meaningful to you, but I may not understand it well. Are there opportunities for improved public transparency around the CIB concessional frame or concessional finance? Can you push a higher standard?
Well, I think transparency is really important for a crown like us. I think we've made pretty big strides in the almost 2 years since I joined in being very clear in how we invest and how we weigh outcomes against the cost of our money.
Yeah.
You can find a lot of information that we now make public. I think we have a ways to go in that still, and I know we have a team in the organization looking at how do we continue to up that. So we're big believers that understanding the story of why we make investments is really important. You know what? We invest, there are some things we do that people say, well, why would you, it's a classic thing, why would you help company X? They're a big company, they make money. Right? So we get that all the time.
Right.
And I think telling those stories and being more transparent is actually really important because the truth is, in those situations, what we're doing is we're helping that company go way beyond, for instance, the building standard. We're sitting in this incredible building. What we're talking about is something that's a quantum leap beyond what's required from a regulatory perspective or a building code or a LEED perspective. And how do you, if we leave that to its own devices, it'll take a long time. And if we can help shorten that cycle, I think there's real value in that. But I think that's a story that needs to be told, and it's a debate that needs to be had. And you hear it we hear it a lot when it comes to carbon capture and storage.
Sure.
Why are you helping the oil companies? Look how much they made last quarter.
Yeah.
And the answer back is, if we want them to go further than the current carbon price will push them, if we want them to go further than the current regulatory environment will push them, this is a way for us to pair so it's kind of like the carrot and the stick, right? If we're upping the game constantly on regulatory requirements, if there's a carbon price that's layering into those and helping to drive market-based decisions, and if we still want those to go faster, then there is a really good case for us. But what I'm trying to say to you is, I think transparency helps because it helps people better understand that push and pull and take it maybe gives them a more nuanced conversation. So that's why I appreciate the question, and we need to keep doing more and more to tell those stories so that there's more context around why did the CIB put government money into something or provide cheap capital and the why.
Yep, makes a lot of sense. And in terms of pace, going back to the question earlier, I'm pretty sure I can guarantee you that you're making investment decisions far faster than people in Ottawa can on either from Infrastructure Canada or from or Transport Canada. And I sat in those seats, so I know fully well. It was a lot of process to get through in Ottawa. Treasury Board, Cabinet, all of that stuff just becomes speed bumps along the way, and you seem to be able to move quite faster.
Yeah, I think setting it up, the governance that we've got set up where government sets the policy outcomes but then really delegates the commercial activity to us and to a private board that we have allows us to just behave differently. And it's funny, there's lots of, you get a lot of questions like, why do we have this thing? The truth is, development banks, we are really an infrastructure development bank. It's not a new concept. They exist in Europe and in Australia and the UK. And since we started, when we hired our first employee 4 years ago, so we're relatively young, but since then, the UK has launched something very similar. A number of US states have talked to us about doing something very similar. The US federal government has announced that they're looking at something similar. So we weren't the first, and we're certainly not the last. I think it's a really useful tool, and to your point, it's just another way that, we're set up differently. I have tons of respect for and I know you do too, having been part of that system. I have respect for what the folks in Ottawa, both bureaucrats and the political side, are doing. And I think they have real respect for us, and they've given us that delegated authority to take their outcomes and get them commercial deals that make them happen.
Yep. Anything to move it along? Thank you. Well, everyone, that's our time with Ehren Cory. He's still going to stick around. I'm going to introduce our special guest, who's a partner with Ehren in a wonderful project. If I could ask John Love to come to the stage. He's the founder and CEO of Kingset Capital, a Canadian private equity real estate investment business. He's on the board of directors of the Chief Executives Organization and is a member of the Business Council of Canada and YPO. Thank you very much, John. Appreciate it. Grab a seat. And I just lost my microphone there.
No worries.
Nice to see you.
It's BYOC here.
There you go.
Exactly. So beautiful room we're in today. Congratulations. This is a lovely space. Thank you very much for having us all here today. We're sitting in one of Canada's most iconic hotels. I think that's fair to say. Where do you start when you start thinking about making a heritage property like this more sustainable? And maybe talk a little bit about the deal that was announced today with CIB.
So the first thing you have to do is to make the asset financially viable long term. And to that extent, after we acquired the property in 2014, under the leadership of my partner, Paul Campbell, we've invested over $200 million in this property through life safety systems and everything you can see and touch and feel in the entire building, which has made it commercially viable. Second up was I challenged our team, Stephen Gross, who oversees this asset, as well as Teresa Warner, who runs our sustainability practice, with a big idea. We just made Scotia Plaza zero carbon. Would it be possible to make this zero carbon? So when we talk about sustainability, we like to talk about specific metrics that we think customers can understand and relate to. And zero carbon couldn't be more clear. So they went away. It's a very complicated process, as one can imagine. And they came up, to my surprise, with an answer that worked. A most ambitious scheme, but it was a substantial financial commitment that really on its own wasn't viable. Mm-hmm. So the project's over $45 million. And you know, just on its, you know, we just couldn't access the capital to finance it and couldn't make sense. And that's where CIB comes in. Mm-hmm. So our team approached CIB and who've come up with a very creative, proposal or a solution for us. And it is, B is the appropriate, it's a bank, we have to pay the money back. Okay. But the fact is that the loan makes that capital available that wouldn't otherwise be available. And it's performance-based. So the interest rate we pay is based on the performance we end up executing as far as for the reduction in greenhouse gas emissions. And we're targeting over 80%. Okay. And we're confident we'll exceed that, and so our pro forma shows a good rate. But I think it's innovative, it's creative, and it's putting a stake in the ground. There's no other hotel in Canada certified carbon zero. Mm. And you know, this is such a high-profile property to begin with. And you know, we're optimistic that we can put our stake in the sand and increasingly attract customers with whom carbon zero aligns with their values and commercial set. But it's also important for us as a business in the resilience and the sustainability of this icon, that it is a forward-looking steward of the environment as well as our customers and our stakeholders.
So Ehren, in his last answer, gave a really said something that I hear all the time, which is, you're a private corporation. Why should you be getting investment from the taxpayers of Canada?
Well, I would say, you know, it's not a doable project in the absence of that. I mean, the short answer is, you know, and you know, COVID took its toll on the hospitality industry. Many hotels were what they call customer light. It's amazing when it's amazing when there's a lockdown, you know, it does a bit to your daily bookings. But the reality is that accessing this kind of capital, there's no collateral. Not like, you know, the bank with the C at the end wouldn't do this. Right. So you have to strip off the C and see the other guys. Right. And so it just. I'm nodding because I understand. I'm not nodding because I'm in agreement. So it is. Keep me clean here, John. I think what our team came up with was a very creative approach, and it, you know, as you can imagine, super complicated, lots of engineering, It's, you know, high technology, heat pump technology, and then you kind of replace, you know, everything else. And so it's an ambitious program, but with that comes a big price tag, and there's no one that would lend us the money to do that.
Okay.
And then in addition, the performance-based incentive from CIB is a most interesting model because they require us to put our money where our mouth is. They're not just lending us the money. They're lending us the money, and, you know, based on us achieving certain performance objectives that are in their policy set, which align with our policy set. But I mean, it's certain objectives. And I think CIBC, and, you know, they've been tough, constructively tough. I mean, it's been like appropriate. There's no gift here. There's no free lunch, right? This is you know, a hardcore business on both sides of the table.
Yeah.
And I think is generating a really constructive outcome for Canada. I mean, just, you know, zero carbon, the Royal York Hotel, that puts a stake in the ground.
It does.
And you know, we'd be optimistic. I mean, now, you know, we're doing this through our office portfolio. We've got a bunch of other files also that we're working with CIB on, and we're hopeful that we'll have some progress with those as well. But, you know, because, you know, we are big believers that this is the future. This is what we have to do, because this is what increasingly our customers will expect us to do. And we want to be out ahead of this, and you know, this is going to be super interesting. It takes 1.5 years to get it done, or a little over a year to get it done. But once it's done, it's going to be super interesting to go to customers who have, you know, have in their annual reports or their sustainability statements or whatever that they, you know, believe in ESG and those sort of things, and we'll say, well, where are you having your next conference?
Yeah.
You know, I'm just saying.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. I like it.
so you know, but I you know, this kind of progress tells also the community it's doable.
Yeah.
Because most people would say, you know, you got a 90-year-old hotel, it's 1.5 million square feet. This is a big building, right?
Yeah.
And you can make that zero carbon. Well, you can. It's just not a simple process.
Any lessons that you're going to take from what you did Scotia here?
Well, Scotia was, you know, which obviously, I mean, it in itself is a 1.5 million square foot building. It had, you know, it informed a variety of decisions for the team, but it also set our office platform in Toronto. I mean, we'll have all of it carbon zero. I think all of it. Somebody probably just cringed in the room, but almost all of it. Or all of it zero carbon within 4 years. And of course, people say to me, we can get there by 2035. I said, you look now, you know how old I am? like let's just, whatever's 2035, can it be 2028 or
So you're big
27?
on faster pace too, yeah.
Yeah, you know, because, I think there's a bit of a, you know, there's urgency here. And it's time and money and energy. So as a chief executive, you got only so many priorities you can carry around in your back pocket, right? And for me, this is one of them, because I think it really distinguishes these assets, and the resilience and sustainability of these properties, I mean, this property, but the other ones we're doing as well, over the long term, I think creates, you know, value for the customers, the stakeholders, and the community.
Yeah. Excuse my back for a second. I'm going to go back to Ehren because I want to ask him, is he as good a partner as he seems to be? Was it a good project to work with him on? He actually pitched for more work too, so I hope that bodes well for the
I
future.
didn't miss that. Yeah, no, and honestly, the decarbonization of the building sector, many people have looked at this. It is one of our biggest challenges, and the only way we're going to get there is by these sort of creative partnerships. They are as great a partner as John says. As I mentioned in my earlier comments, to us, working with partners who have ambitions that stretch well beyond the requirement and getting to something truly approaching zero carbon, as John said. I think this building might have a little bit of gas in the kitchen still to cook with, and like we're talking about at the very margins. So
you know, what we're left with here is two things. You know, one is the chef had quit, so there's a stove somewhere.
Yes.
That's gas. And then you've got about 6% of the electricity grid.
That's right.
Which has to be offset.
So we refer to that as net zero ready, meaning this building can be net zero as soon as the rate limiter will be actually getting our grid in Ontario the last bit clean.
Right.
And so
we have the same thing at Scotia. We have to offset 6% of that load. I mean, there's two things. First of all, is reducing the load. We've made significant strides everywhere, just reducing the load. Obviously, that's job one. Then with the rest, electrification, then you're left with this small piece. And just to digress a moment, the next thing we're waiting for, because the whole carbon offset business is a mug's game, and we need, really either the government or a quasi-government entity to rate and allow trading of carbon credits that are, because it's so hard to source in Canada quality carbon credits. Someone says they're not going to cut their grass, therefore it's a carbon credit, they sell it to somebody. That, that's a bad set of facts. You need things that, and the industry, the sustainability industry knows what a quality credit is, but it needs to be sanctioned by a government body so people can trade and understand they're acquiring a tier 1 credit and so on and so forth. Anyway, I think there'll always be some element of this, because the fact is that there'll always be, well, maybe not always, but there'll be some fossil fuel element for a considerable period of time. Witness the Ontario grid. But, and if you get into other provinces, the percentage of the grid is mostly higher. So those issues we still have to sort our way through. But the core issue, and this is where, like to be LEEDs or ASHRAE or Green Building Council, Toronto Green Building Council, those don't mean anything to our customer. Zero carbon, and we want to be crystal clear, zero carbon is what we're doing, our objective, and I think that resonates with the customer because the customer can understand that.
Yeah, and you can see why that's a good partner to us, because
absolutely.
And as John says, that's why we provide our financing linked to the outcome. It goes right back to what we talked about earlier. Like, we are investing taxpayer money to get a public good. The public good in this case is that accelerated GHG emission reduction, and so putting our money in that with a variable interest rate that's based on the achievement, as you said, forces you to put your money where your mouth is.
Right,
On the
we
other
take
hand,
the
us
risk.
too, because we're putting it against those outcomes.
Great. Well, I'm sure we can go on for a long time, but I'm getting the signal in the back there to wrap this sucker up, and I will. And by the way, if you're talking about ways to figure out the offset, the CIB with the C on the end, we can talk to you about that. We understand a few things about that nonetheless. Anyway, thank you, everybody. Delight. Ehren Cory, John Love.
Thanks, John.
That was truly fantastic. Thank you to all three of you. Ehren, on behalf of the Canadian Club Toronto, I want to thank you for sharing your clear enthusiasm and passion with our audience here as well as online this afternoon. Clearly much to be done still to ensure that Canadians have the ability to enjoy the critical infrastructure in the future, like roads, clean air, water, transit, just to name a few. So I think from a global perspective, we learned that we're doing well, but there's clearly much more that can be done to ensure equitable access really to coast. Canada Infrastructure Bank plays a decisive role in realizing the nation's infrastructure goals, and your leadership is clearly moving us forward. And we're very excited by the possibilities that public, private, and Indigenous partners will realize for us in the future. I wish you all the best as you work to deliver on the bank's mandate. Us Canadians are counting on it. And to our exceptional moderator, Lisa, thank you so much, the Honourable Lisa Raitt. Thank you for bringing your leadership and wide-ranging perspective to an expertly moderated session this afternoon. I, for one, am very, very appreciative. And to our special secret guest, John Love, so excited to hear about the great work that we've done right here, kind of in this fantastic building, the iconic Royal York, the Canadian Club's primary partner, I'll say, hotel partner since 1929. Clearly, both of our organizations are investing to make the world a better place. Thank you, John, for sharing your clear passion and enthusiasm as well for this important project. Now, before we conclude, I know we're pretty much at time, everyone. I would like to take this opportunity to touch on a couple of upcoming events and invite you to them as well. Tomorrow, right back in this room, we have an economic outlook that addresses a potential recession and whether it's a necessary correction or a deep structural reset. On October 4th, we have a virtual discussion, frankly, on some of the topics that you just raised, John, the key success factors for navigating net zero goals and the reporting therein. The event will feature Jonathan Hackett, Head of Sustainable Finance from BMO, as well as Laura Zizzo, CEO of Manifest Climate, among many others as well. So do visit CanadianClub.org for more information on those events. You'll find membership options available there, as well as obviously purchase of the tickets. I hope that you will find the time to join us. Once again, thank you to BLG and Bruce Power for their incredible support today. We couldn't have had this event without you. Canadian Club's vision is to be the podium of choice for relevant and provocative conversations, connecting the business community here and promoting an inclusive and prosperous Canada. We aim to achieve this vision at every event, and clearly today was an exemplar of that. Thank you so much to all of you for being a part of it. Take care, be healthy, and we'll see you again soon.